Good afternoon and welcome to the January 21, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting for Johnson County Community College. Thank you for those of you who are attending via Zoom. We will open the meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll recall that last meeting or 2 months ago, I messed up the Pledge of Allegiance, and now I'm panicked every time we do it, and I did it again. I apologize. All of the trustees are present either by Zoom or in the chambers. Trustee Cross is appearing remotely. Dr. Bound is in the chambers, as well as our CRAC IS team, Chris and Jason, along with a number of people behind the scenes as we continue to deal with the pandemic and ensuring that our meetings are open to the public pursuant to the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So we do have a quorum, and we're ready. First item on the agenda is awards and recognition, and I understand Dr. Mickey McLeod is going to introduce those awards. Dr. McLeod?
Yes, thank you, sir. I'd first like to say that we have some awards that have come in for our folks that have been conferred before, but of course with the pandemic, people were not able to be honored. Ceremonies were suspended for some awards, and this happens to be one of those. It was an award that was delivered to us as part of the end of 2019's award season. And so I'd like to honor Doctors Ty Edwards and James Liker for their work on the Kindaro ruins. They were honored by Historic Kansas City with the 2019 Historic Preservation Award. This sort of work is something that I've witnessed in my 4 years of time at Johnson County in multiple ways, particularly these two professors. Dr. Liker and Dr. Edwards have worked on a number of historic trails and monuments throughout Johnson County. And this is one that I think is particularly timely for us because when we look at the history of the Kindaro ruins, its place in history as a part of the Jayhawker movement and a way station along the Underground Railroad, as well as what Kindaro itself means. That the word in the ancient Wyandot language means a bundle of sticks and is meant to be used to show how we are stronger together, as it is much more difficult to destroy sticks when they are tied together in a bundle to add strength and weight. And as such, it's telling that as we've gone through what we've gone through over the past year with both national upheavals and the pandemic, that we have leaders in our faculty who are applying their trade as academics to continue to strengthen this community and to continue to call upon their knowledge and skills to help us all be stronger together, to recognize our history, to recognize our culture, to understand what it means for us to continue to be a united society, and to remember where we've come from so that we do not repeat our mistakes of the past. And so with that, I will say thank you very much to Drs. Liker and Edwards, and how proud this institution is to have them be a part of our faculty and the work that they do in this community.
Thank you, Mickey. And I guess I'm not sure in a Zoom call whether normally we would have you step to the podium, Ty and Jim, and if you had any words to make. I know that Jim has speaker privileges for future on the agenda. I don't know about Ty. They both do. So if you guys want to have, Ty, do you want to go first and respond? Congratulations.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, Jim and I want to both thank Historic Kansas City. They were celebrating the work of Marvin Robinson and lots of other activists in Kindaro that have done a lot of work trying to preserve and promote that community for decades. And I think it's very kind that Marvin shared this with a variety of people, including Jim and I. I do want to say Jim and I presented at a conference in 2018 about Kindaro's history, and then Jim and I co-edited a volume of Kansas history that included presentations from that conference, and our goal was to elevate that history and to make sure voices of the Wyandotte Nation, of the Black community there, of Western University. A lot of our Kansans don't know that the first historically Black college or university west of the Mississippi River was in Kansas, and it trained a lot of Black leaders, and that was in Quindaro. And I also used that journal volume as a chance for a student intern from JCCC to work in the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library oral histories, and she published edited oral histories. So we had a student leave Johnson County Community College as a published peer-reviewed scholar as a part of that project. And then as Kansas Studies Institute director, I worked with Reverend Evans, who runs the Western University Association today, to fundraise for that project. And we had Representative Sharice David speak at that event. And the first piece of legislation that Representative David proposed to Congress was commemoration of Quindaro and to make it into a national commemorative site, which Pat Roberts supported in the Senate, and that became congressional law in 2019. So that's a big success. So I just want to say that Jim and I cared about Quindaro history on a personal and professional level, and we were able to use our roles at JCCC, especially Kansas Studies Institute, which of course Jim founded and now I'm the director of, to help advance that work. And I think that that shows how Kansas Studies Institute and entities like it can be very innovative, but more than that, they can be embedded in the community to do service that serves our broader community. And I liked to joke in my program review that I was directly related to congressional legislation, so I could argue that I served 330 million Americans in my program review for 2019. So again, thank you to Marvin Robinson and everyone doing this work in the Quindaro community. And thank you to the college for letting organizations like the Kansas Studies Institute exist for us to do a lot of this innovative work with our students and with the community. And of course, we are really grateful to Historic KC for acknowledging all of this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Ty. Jim, good luck following that, but you have the opportunity.
I think she said it all. I'll reserve my comments for the FA report later.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Again, thank you both for reaching out and putting the community in community college. Very important piece of Kansas history. The next item on the agenda is the open forum. The open forum is a period during each regularly scheduled board meeting where members of the public can make comments about items of interest to them that relate to the college. In a normal event, we would have 5 minutes each. If in the event a number of speakers are signed up before the meeting, I could limit each one to 3. Today, nobody has signed up, so we have no open forum session, but be aware that in the future, if it is a Zoom meeting, a virtual meeting, you can sign up by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the day before the meeting. If it is a regular in-person meeting, someday when we get back to normal, you can sign up immediately before the meeting on the day of the meeting. The next item would be, we'll move on to board reports. The first item is Student Senate, Saylor Usher. Saylor, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, we're really excited for the spring semester, and we've been working on a few projects. Senators had a great retreat over the winter, and we got to take some time to do the SWOT analysis. And, oh, I got a notification, okay. The Student Senate's collaborating with the CSI on a virtual common space and a study hall where students can meet their peers and attend events. It's hosted on CSI's Discord server, which is kind of like Slack if you've used Slack before. And CSI found it was a better way to engage students and get them going to events. And a lot of clubs have Discord servers, so we're also reaching out to them to get it more interactive and more collaborative. And then after that, we're preparing for the Student Senate elections to bring a new executive board and to bring some new senators. We've also had, I think, 3 new senators who are going to be attending our GAs, and then hopefully they'll become senators for this spring semester. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Saylor. Questions for Saylor? I don't see any. Thank you very much for that report. The next item is the college lobbyist, Dick Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go through these items as quickly as possible. You received a report earlier this week. Many of the things that I'm going to talk about are different and/or updates from items that may or may not be included in that report. The 2021 Kansas legislative session began on January 11th. We're just about now to complete our second week of the session. About 8 years ago, I mentioned to a client that we've never seen it like this before, and boy, does that certainly hold true for this year. Several rooms have no capacity for a gallery or participants. There are no visitor groups allowed in the Capitol building, so we won't be seeing any of the leadership type groups or school groups, or just quite frankly the visitors that come to the Capitol throughout the year. We have used federal dollars to equip the committee rooms with cameras, large screen TVs, and WebEx capability. That is still not 100% functional in several committee rooms. Most of the committee rooms can be heard online through the Kansas Legislative website, but there are still several hiccups preventing 100% participation, at least online. Not much congregating in the building, so basically we catch people in their offices if they're willing to receive visitors, or walking to and from meetings. That's been a way that we normally do business, but that's kind of the way everything is occurring this year. Revisers are backed up. They are the folks that write the bills, the legislation, and bills are slow to coming into print and into the hopper. With regard to the budget, December revenues were up $13.6 million. Again, those revenues have continued to show upticks, largely due to the increase in federal dollars or the infusion of cash from federal supplements. Part of the governor's budget recommendations are built on models that were rejected last year. One example is the reamortization of CAPERS. That would provide about $350 million for budget expenditures. We'll see what the legislature does with that. The good news is that there's been a significant reduction in the borrowing from what we call the Bank of KDOT, and that continues to be one of the governor's efforts to reduce the transfers or the sweeps from KDOT coffers. The governor's budget recommendations for higher education are not as rosy. The state universities are seeing in the neighborhood of 5% cuts to their budget. For community colleges, we initially thought the cut was only around 2% to tiered and non-tiered formula courses. However, when we examine the Senate Bill 155 and Excel and CTE course reimbursements, that's approximately a 16.8% cut from FY20 actual expenditures. You'll recall that those monies always come in after the courses have been delivered. And so that is a huge concern as we work on budget issues this year. It's about an $8.5 million allotment in the current year. And again, those courses have already been delivered. There are bills in the Senate that have been fast-tracked. Senate Bill 13 is a property tax transparency bill. That bill has been in the process for the past couple of years and has been vetoed by the governor's office. My guess is that when it makes it to her desk, it will be vetoed again. However, the numbers are very different in the House and Senate this year as far as veto override majority. So we'll see what happens there. The other bill that flew through the Senate and had hearings yesterday and today, I believe, in the House was the emergency management extension through March 2021. That's another bill that is on its way to the governor's office. And then today, as we speak, off to the left, I still have the Senate playing. They are debating the constitutional amendment on abortion. So they will be going quite late this evening on that matter. With regard to other higher education matters, the College Promise Bill, which is the last dollar tuition provided, was introduced today in the Senate Education Committee. There will be a hearing on Monday. The bill is the similar concept that was heard and passed last year, but due to the way the session ended, did not make it all the way through the process. Senate Bill 32 is a bill that was requested by the Wichita School District that allows school districts to pick up the tab for dual enrolled or concurrent enrollment courses. Now, that excludes Senate Bill 155 and Excel and CTE courses. That bill, Senate Bill 32, also includes a tuition waiver for foster care students, and that was a separate bill last year. So those two bills are married up together this year. No hearing has been scheduled yet. It may be coming soon next week, actually, in Senate Education. Awaiting introduction of a bill to amend the Motorcycle and Truck Driver Training Fund. That's important for some of the coursework that goes on our campus, and we're monitoring that issue very closely. It would move the fund from the Department of Education, the Kansas State Department of Education, to the Department of Revenue under the umbrella of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Another testament to how strange this year is, we picked up intelligence late Tuesday afternoon about a policy discussion or a change to the way tenured faculty might be treated. It was unknown at the time if it impacted community college faculty. It was not published in any Board of Regents agenda, was not discussed in the Future of Higher Ed Council, was not listed in any of the Board of Regents legislative initiatives that we reviewed earlier in the fall last year. We learned that the Governance Committee brushed through the proposal Wednesday morning and voted it out 4-0 with very little discussion to the full board. I would note that newly appointed Regent Kiplinger mentioned that it was a significant policy shift that would no doubt create and generate concern and discussion throughout the higher ed community. And I think it has in just those 24 hours. We did learn that it does not impact community college faculty at this point. I guess my concern is anytime I hear about scenarios or policy changes like this, those things can sometimes take on a life of their own, grow legs, and become something that maybe they weren't intended to be. The board voted to adopt that policy later in the day yesterday, 9-0. So that's a tool that will be in place or at least available for management at the state university level. As part of the Board of Regents agenda, the System Council of Government Relations Officers was invited to participate in a session this morning with the Board of Regents, an institution or association execs. It was mostly an awkward exchange. Each sector was given the opportunity to present a brief update on engagement and advocacy and exchange with the board. The board CEO, Blake Flanders, said that all is well with higher ed. And later in the meeting, it kind of went unaddressed. Later in the meeting, President Myers from K-State strongly rebutted that statement by saying all is not well in higher ed, specifically related to the necessity for the cuts that have been put in place. And so that was where things began to deteriorate fairly significantly. I would say that the Board of Regents and the institutions are not on the same page. That is very different from most years. The association, the Community College Association, I don't want to step on Nancy's report or take away any thunder that she might have, but a letter was sent was delivered today regarding the significant cuts to Senate Bill 155 and CTE, and just a general explanation of why that is so serious since those courses have already been delivered. My understanding is that the Kansas Association of Technical Colleges will come on board and support that letter. Both the Senate and House committees have had presentations by the community college system. The Board of Regents made their first foray into the Capitol today. I would tell you that especially in the House committee, and I know that the Senate committee believes this, but that there's many new members in the legislature, and specifically on the House Higher Ed Committee. It's very clear that there is strong support for community colleges, so that was really good to hear. I suppose as a way to close out, Mr. Chair, with regard to COVID, higher ed does not appear to be on the radar for phased vaccinations. There are some, I should say, in childcare or in healthcare fields where they may be interacting in clinical settings that may receive the vaccine, but it's not being widely distributed. It certainly is not being discussed like it might be in the K-12 setting. Like I said, the race is on for fast-tracked legislation. That's concerning. That's the way things get rammed through very quickly with little discussion, little interaction to really truly work through bills and proposals. It's made even more difficult by the current scenario, the way the Capitol has to be orchestrated for COVID. Each day or every other day throughout the week, we will learn of new cases that have been identified in the State House. Just a reminder, the state legislature has one constitutional obligation, and that's to pass a balanced budget. So we've got a lot of things going on. Like I said, fast tracking of items. Really all we have to do is pass that budget, and that would be the total obligation of the legislature. Everything else is additional after that. So who knows how long things will continue to operate in the current setting. We hope that it continues to move forward so that we can get through the list of legislative items and hopefully have a better year than last year. But it's a lot of unknowns, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I will mention, you mentioned two acronyms that I think we ought to explain. CTE is Career Technical Education Funding, and ESL is English as a Second Language, two important things that we do here at the college. And I think you indicated there would be a 16% budget cut in those and reimbursing for courses already completed. But those are two very important parts of what we do here to prepare people for the next step in life, whether it's a career and a job or further education or transfer. So other questions for Mr. Carter?
Lee has his hand up.
Trustee Cross, virtually.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I apologize, I'm not there. My paranoia and I think President Bush would call it vigilance is still high on COVID, so I thank you for your patience. Mr. Carter, I don't see it in your report, the information about tenure for faculty. I think you mentioned it though.
Yeah, that all came about after my report had already been submitted. We learned of that on the fly, and it was rumor. It was all rumor until we were able to substantiate it at about 7:30 p.m. Tuesday evening.
No, I understand, and I appreciate you raising the issue. What bill was it?
There's no bill. I believe it'll be a policy change at the Board of Regents. But again, those were all many of the unknowns that caused us grave consternation.
Yeah, I have, like you and everyone else, am caught off guard, and I don't have time to process it. I certainly hope President Leiker will consider it, and certainly others in the higher ed community will discuss it. But thank you for raising the issue, Mr. Carter.
There are no other questions. I think I'm going to make a little bit of a soapbox pontification about Senate Bill 13, the so-called property tax transparency bill, which is completely misnamed because it adds zero to the disclosures already made by governmental entities in Johnson County or across the state. And it adds zero to what we do as a board here. Every time we get a budget in my 11 years on the board, it indicates that if we keep the same mill levy, it indicates an estimated amount of property taxes that we will receive. In the early years of my tenure after the 2008-2009 recession, we actually received less with the same mill levy because assessed valuation went down for really the first time in modern history of Johnson County. The last several years, our fuss has been about how much to take over and above what we took in the last year and whether we should lower the mill levy some percentage or a tenth of a mill or whatever. So every year for the last 11, we have voted on a budget that indicates whether or not we're going to receive more property tax revenues than we did the year before. Several years ago, the legislature said, well, you have to sign a separate document as a trustee indicating that you are indeed taking more money than you did the year before. And I think we all do that. And now the legislature says, well, you're going to have another public hearing, which we already do, and you're going to have a separate vote to take more money than you took in last year, which we already vote on. And in addition, the county has to send out a notice of the public hearing for every single taxing jurisdiction in the county. And think about that, 21 cities, the county, the library, the community college, 7 school districts. If they don't decrease their mill levy and assessed valuation goes up, every one of them has to have a new public hearing, a new vote, and the county has to send a letter to every taxpayer in that entity telling them when all the public hearings are. It is an absurd burden on local government. It adds nothing to what the taxpayers already know or can find out, but it allows the legislature to say, hey, I took care of it, it's the local government that you need to go talk to. I find it a little bit offensive. I know it passed 34-1, but for the public that's watching, we have always told you how much more money we are going to take from property taxes with the existing mill levy. We have always had a public hearing on that. We have always voted on that. So if you hear about a property tax transparency bill, you might ask yourself what they're being transparent about other than to shift the burden to local government for property taxes and to shift the discussion to a responsibility for local governments that we've already taken on. So, Dick, I'm not expecting a response to that, but it irks me when the legislature acts like we're not doing what we're already doing. So if there are no other questions or comments, Jerry Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is really not as significant as what you just espoused, but Mr. Carter, I do have a question on your written report. The governor noted that her administration has distributed more than $50 million in broadband connectivity grants, and then over in her budget, she's recommending $54.5 million on technology improvements. And I know for the state of Kansas and many of our rural friends, broadband accessibility is a real issue. Did the $50 million that she's already contributed come from the CARES fund, or did she find that somewhere in the budget, or do you know?
The initial 50 came from the CARES or SPARK money. Yes, that is correct.
And so the 54 she's proposing in her new budget would come from state funds, and is that how you perceive that?
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
Trustee Cross.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The Senate Bill 13 that you just discussed, I do not disagree with you. I'm just asking for clarification. I have been tied up in my law practice and family. What are they requiring of us?
We would have to have a public hearing specifically with respect to the increase in revenues we are accepting from property taxes versus the year before. Essentially, your mill levy would automatically roll back to take in the same amount of money as the year before. And if you wanted to increase it back to where it was or to some other level, you would have to do that through a public hearing. And that public hearing would have to be noticed by the county for every jurisdiction that sought to do so.
We don't always agree on mill levy votes, you and I, but don't we do that? I think you said that. I want to beat this dead horse, Mr. Chair.
Right. We already do all that. And I talked to the chair of the county commission. It would be about $150,000 just in mailing costs alone, let alone staff costs. And I frankly don't know how you coordinate it, because if you lived where we are sitting now, you would have to send it to the community college, to Overland Park, to the Blue Valley School District, and to whatever other taxing jurisdictions. You'd have to coordinate when they're having their hearings, put that on a piece of paper, and only mail it to people within those jurisdictions.
So
mail
wouldn't
one to
that be a
everybody
tax
with the entire
increase,
county.
Mr. Chair?
I'm saying?
Wouldn't that be a tax increase, Mr. Chair,
Well, it
effectively?
would be an expenditure increase on local governments.
No further questions.
I didn't think school districts and the community colleges were subject to that bill. I could be wrong, but
At
we'll
any
look into
rate.
it, or Dick can
Yeah.
look into that. But
I'd love to know that.
In previous iterations of the bill, that is correct. I do believe that under the current construct of Senate Bill 13, that they would fall, that school districts and community colleges would fall under the notice provisions. There is a couple of changes. The previous iterations of the bill would have required JCCC to send out the letter or notice. There now is one single notice based on the way the bill is proposed or drafted that would come out from the county. Now, we may get a bill for a prorated portion of that from the county since we operate within the entire county. Townships, local municipalities may have a different reimbursement rate based on whatever. I don't know what that looks like yet from when it comes out from the county.
Thank you, Trustee Snyder, for that clarification.
I believe Trustee Weston.
Nope, no, I was just making sure Trustee Cross had his
Okay.
question. He had his hand up.
All right, I think we're done with Mr. Carter. Thank you, Dick. Big job in Topeka. Next item on the agenda is to hear from the Faculty Association President, Dr. Jim Liker. Floor is yours, Jim.
Yeah, good evening. Before I start my report, I want to thank Dr. McLeod for the kind words earlier. You know, it's hard, Mickey, to offer criticism about the CAO's decisions when you say such nice things about us, so well played. Continuing with that theme of faculty accomplishments, I'd like to draw your attention to a series of events that are coming up in late January and February. The College Scholar Program is near and dear to my heart. During President Callaway's era, I sold him on the idea of an annual series of public events by which faculty could share the results of their ongoing research. He embraced it enthusiastically, and since then the program continues to showcase our professors' work, both full-time and part-time. This year, of course, the presentations are virtual. Between tonight and the next board meeting, we will hear presentations from Jeffrey Oden in environmental science. Author Andrea Broomfield will be speaking about Kansas City's lost restaurants. And the two best presentations, because they're in my department, Ben Clark and Stacy Davidson, will be delivering topics on 19th century American history. A fifth presentation by Sayanti Puckett will conclude the series on February 26th. It's always a pleasure, and it doesn't happen often enough to see trustees and cabinet members at these kinds of events. It's important to us that the decision makers understand the work we do outside the classroom in order to do what's needed inside of it. A mentor in my senior year of high school told me that for every hour spent in a college class, you better plan on 3 hours of studying. If I'd listened to that, my undergraduate career might have been a little bit more distinguished, but as a faculty member, I have certainly found that to be the case. That's a decent segue into a topic I'd like to address concerning board communications. It's my understanding that starting in February, committees like Management, HR, and Learning Quality will be replaced by a committee of the whole. I followed the retreat from last fall, and I believe I understand the arguments for this new approach. Many in FA have always wondered why the board gets into the weeds, so to speak, on so many routine matters through the traditional committee structure. At the Faculty Association meeting last week, we discussed what this would mean for us, the possible ramifications. And as Dr. Bound has pointed out, and most of you already know, the most direct effect would be on learning quality. That's where sabbatical recipients have been reporting on their projects. That reporting process is a requirement of the master agreement as it currently stands. Now, realizing it's hard to summarize the opinions of a diverse group like ours, the prevailing sentiment is we prefer to keep some mechanism for that reporting to continue. I've observed learning quality for years. I've presented there once or twice, and it's always been enjoyable to watch Trustee Cook or Trustee Smith-Everett ask questions, have a little Q&A with the instructors, and then bring those findings back to the larger body. Since I don't anticipate that format will continue under a committee of the whole, I ask of Mr. Musil and others that we do some brainstorming to find a suitable alternative. Perhaps that could happen in collegial steering, perhaps in a separate conversation, and while the alternative we might find is anyone's guess. I do think it's important as the board implements this that your opportunities to hear directly from faculty not be lost. You know, I can remember not that long ago when it was almost considered insubordination for someone other than the president to speak to trustees. We've come a long way since then. This is a large organization with lots of vertical layers, more hierarchical than some of us would like, and we've all played the phone game. We know how messages can get garbled. I'm confident as you move to a committee of the whole that we'll find those opportunities for direct engagement. In other news, this week we began our third semester, not counting summer and winterim, dealing with the pandemic. There are a lot of conversations going on about COVID reporting procedures, testing, which we've discussed before, and since higher ed does not seem to be included in the state's current vaccination plan, lots of questions about when the responsible moment will arrive for the majority of faculty and students to return to campus. Also this morning, the FA negotiation and research teams, along with the Executive Council, met to discuss the results of the faculty survey we administered last semester. With contract negotiations on the table soon, we're assembling a list of our priorities and we'll be holding a series of informative sessions so that we can keep our people in the loop between now and May. I want to go off script just a second to address Mr. Carter's point earlier concerning KBOR's new policy regarding tenured faculty. Tuesday night, Dr. Bown and Mr. Carter reached out to me directly to inform me that this was likely going to occur. We were all kind of surprised, as he said. I've spent that time since then in lots of conversations with FA officers, with ex-FA presidents. I've been on the phone with K&A Legal, and I've been hearing a fair amount from panicked friends, I think that's the right adjective, at places like KU and K-State. Anticipating that this was going to create some shockwaves among our faculty, I sent out a message to our listserv a couple of hours ago explaining the difference between tenure and due process. What we actually have at this community college is not tenure, but due process rights past the probationary period. And my understanding, I think, is identical to that of the other players I've talked to, is that that is not a privilege that's bestowed by KBOR, but rather it is something that is negotiated in our master agreement at the local level. So I'm hoping that that puts some of those fears to rest. Now, that being said, any attack on tenure at other parts of higher ed in the state is not good for us, but I personally don't see an imminent reason for our people to be alarmed about this. Finally, I want to extend a hearty thank you to Mr. Musil and Dr. Bown for their remarks at the all-faculty meeting concerning the insurrection in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The last time an event shook Americans that hard came in 2001, and while I didn't find it completely surprising because all the warning signs were certainly there, it did remind me as a historian that this is what living through a national crisis feels like. There were some in faculty ranks who would have preferred a written statement, just like there were some who questioned the FA's own statement that I put on the listserv the day before. We're in such a toxic environment now where expressing even an informed opinion can carry consequences, and yet that's exactly what effective leadership calls for. So kudos to both of you. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. I think Dr. Bown and I were both profoundly moved by what happened on January 6th, and I don't remember all of my remarks, but I do remember commenting that what was once unthinkable must now be unforgivable, and that attack on our Capitol is unforgivable. So, any other questions or comments for Dr. Leiker? You must have done a great job, Jim. Thank you. And I should comment on the committee of the whole. We will be speaking to that later in the meeting under new business, and Dr. Bown will be talking about how we're going to move to the next step of that. I appreciate your comments, and I would suggest that you talk to Dr. Bown about ways to continue the sabbatical reporting process. And I'm really thinking during Zoom, it would be great if we could do those and even record them. I mean, part of the problem for some trustees is the time of day that those are held, but I agree with you, Jim, those are important parts of understanding what our faculty are doing. And frankly, defending the sabbatical process, which some people don't fully understand, how it can benefit individual faculty members and be transferred back to the rest of the college. So I would agree with you on that. And obviously the move to committee of the whole was not in any way intended to stop those kind of reports from faculty who have had sabbatical. So that will be part of new business.
If I may,
Trustee Smith Everett.
I was going to say similar comments, and just that I think as the board is looking for new opportunities, every opportunity brings with it benefits and maybe negative side effects. And I think we're very willing to be, to get creative and to offer different ways to do things that still meet the same goals. And I would share the sentiments by Dr. Leiker that I think that's an important component of communicating with our faculty and staff and having great dialogue about the benefits of it. So I for one, feel the same way, that I think this is an opportunity and we'll hopefully find ways to keep that.
Thank you. Trustee Cook.
Well, I wanted to save my remarks till the new business, but because it's fresh in my mind, I might forget by then. But I appreciated, Dr. Leiker, your comment about the opportunity to have the faculty report on their sabbatical leaves. And who knows how long the COVID social distancing masking will occur. But we have some really fantastic auditoriums where social distancing can certainly be applied. And I've often thought that on those sabbatical presentations, they could be held at a conveniently agreed upon time to make that presentation, followed by a reception of cookies and coffee or whatever for further discussion. And maybe 2 or 3 sabbaticals could be held at one setting over an hour or 2-hour period in one of our fine auditoriums. So that would be my hope, because they really should be available for all the community to hear and see, because some fantastic work occurs. And not only occurs of past learning, but what's important to the community, and I think to the college and to students, is how those sabbaticals transform the distribution of the knowledge of the new course going forward. That is what's really powerful. So I'm sorry to take time now, but it was fresh.
Jim, I think you have a pretty good consensus here with Dr. Bound that we want to find a way to make that continue to work. Thank you for your time. The next item on the agenda is Johnson County Education Research Triangle with Trustee Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not met since our last meeting. I will tell you that we meet again on April 19th, 2021 at Kansas State University at Olathe. I will note that Representative Brandon Woodard, Michael Boehm, and Kevin Honemichael are now on our board. And so if I botched those names, I'm sorry, but I did want to note that there's really nothing else to report, Mr. Chair, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. And you always say we haven't met, and people wonder when you meet. The board meets quarterly, so it's not like you're not meeting. It's just we're in between those quarterly meetings. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I thank you for, you always pick me up on that. I appreciate that. I'll add that to my report.
Yeah, I just don't want people to think you're not doing anything, Lee.
Well.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Kansas Association of Community College Trustees. Trustee Ingram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And likewise, I will follow with Trustee Cross's comments about your being a quarterly meeting. We are, in fact, a quarterly meeting as well. So we did take a little time off during the holidays. We actually had our last quarterly meeting in December, which I reported on at our December meeting. So our next quarterly meeting will not be until March. And as we look ahead, probably March and in June again will more than likely be virtual. In March in the past, we have also had the PTK Luncheon, which honors all the honorary PTK members across the state. And in fact, that was the last time we were all together as KCCT in person, nearly a year ago. And that particular day was when things began to close down. And I know I've mentioned that before, but it was really remarkable to be a part of that. So the Phi Theta Kappa Luncheon will not take place this year. Our executive director, Heather Morgan, is working with the state director of Phi Theta Kappa, and her name is Tammy Flintus. And I have never met Tammy, but I know she and Heather are trying to figure out what they are going to do in lieu of a luncheon this year, but we will not be having a luncheon. And I believe that there will be coordination between our representative here on this campus, along with the state coordinator to make those plans. We still are having Friday calls. We are part of the calls of the presidents. It's actually a presidential call that takes place, but you've heard me mention that from time to time. Those calls were generated during the legislative session last year when the session began to take place, and they have simply continued primarily because of COVID. So in speaking with Dr. Baum the other day, we were talking about, how best to communicate the information. It's like someone mentioned earlier this evening, you meet and then a week later things have changed. I mean, that's just where we're living right now. So, I think I tend to not probably provide a whole lot of information on a monthly basis until we get down to the wire and figure out where we are and what we should be sharing. But we do know that we have some more CARES money we are anticipating coming through, and I think that will be something that Dr. Baum will be visiting about. We are still, as I mentioned, having those Friday calls, but they've primarily been COVID-related and just the fallout as to what everyone is experiencing and how we can work together as a system to begin to look at recovery at this point, but how we've kind of made it through where we are right now, whether it be athletics or the actual face-to-face classes. I mean, there's just a variety of topics that get brought up on a weekly basis. So our executive committee also has a phone call once a month. We did not have a phone call in December, just due to the holidays, did not have that phone call. We will have our phone call, our monthly phone call this coming Monday, so I will be able to catch you all up next month. So that's all I have to report right now.
Questions for Trustee Ingram? If not, we're ready to move to the foundation report. Trustee Snyder.
Lee, we had a question.
Lee, did you have a question?
Question, comment, Mr. Chair, if I may, for Trustee Ingram. Thank you, Trustee Ingram, for your work on KACCT. I think that there's a reason why the community college movement in Kansas is so popular, and it's crazy to me who watches these things, such as Senator Baumgartner and others, but the community college movement is relatively untouchable, and that's thanks to your work and that organization and all of our allies, and I appreciate you. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. We'll move on to the foundation report. Trustee Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustee Cross and I just joined the foundation as liaisons starting in January, and it's already apparent to me that the foundation has hit the ground running for 2021. I do want to take just a tiny step back to focus a little bit on highlights from 2020. For donors, year-end giving is always an important component to their financial planning, and in December of last year, the foundation received more than 600 gifts totaling $640,000, which is just remarkable. And these contributions benefited everything from student scholarships to our adult education programs and supported a number of program areas. And of course, every gift is extremely meaningful to the college and makes an impact, even if it's an incremental progress toward our mission. I do want to highlight one year-end gift that was especially noteworthy. On the last day of the year, the foundation received a $428 gift from Al Lex LLC. Some of you may recall this story that was shared in 2020, but Al Lex LLC is a local custom design t-shirt company that was started by two young women, Allie and Alexis, after meeting and developing the business idea here as students. Allie and Alexis made the decision to give back a portion of their fourth quarter proceeds to the Student Basic Needs Center as part of the foundation's recent Some Enchanted Opportunity campaign. As I mentioned, every gift is important, but we thought since that came from past students, that was especially noteworthy. So thank you to them. Speaking of Some Enchanted Opportunity, as you all know, Some Enchanted Evening was transformed to Some Enchanted Opportunity to deal with the constraints that we were given, and it really just turned out phenomenally above our expectations. The campaign raised more than $1 million, all benefiting student scholarships and basic needs resources, so it was just tremendous. And we can't thank the community enough for this support. And while we're not able to get together in person, which is a highlight for so many in our community, The foundation staff is putting the finishing touches on a very special commemorative book. And this book will bring together dozens of stories from 2020 that spotlighted our Johnson Countyans of the Year, which are our essential workers in the community. The book will be made available to those who participated in the campaign and the community as a whole with print and digital versions, and we'll look forward to sharing the book soon. Finally, the Foundation's Board of Directors held their regularly scheduled meeting last night via Zoom. There was a brief regular agenda, and then the Foundation's Board of Directors were provided an opportunity to participate in a facilitated strategic planning SWOT feedback session, similar to those being offered to faculty, staff, and other stakeholders. I'd like to thank Dr. Bound and John Clayton for their work in leading this session. The Board Development Committee will be meeting on January 27th via Zoom to review recommendations for potential new board members. The Foundation's Investment Committee is also scheduled to hold their first quarterly meeting of 2021 on February 2nd at 4 p.m. via Zoom. And finally, just as a reminder to everyone, the first Foundation Members Social of 2021 is scheduled for Thursday, February 25th from 4:30 to 6. Working on several options to make sure it's safe, socially distanced, if possible, but also planning some backup plans for virtual options, and a final decision will be made soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thanks to the foundation and all of our generous donors to do $1 million for some enchanted opportunity. We did $1 million last year, but we also had the expenses of a gala to take out of it. So I don't know what the net was, but this is a net $1 million plus to our foundation. So that is fantastic and due to the community. Questions for Paul on foundation matters?
No questions, but I thank you so much, Trustee Snyder, for bringing that information about Allie and Alex Shirt Company. I think if you can provide more information about those opportunities, I really appreciate you noticing that and making sure that that was known here.
Absolutely, but the heavy lifting is done by Rob Wyrick and others preparing a nice report that I try and summarize. I probably left out some details they would love. They would love the opportunity, and there's so much going on. They could give a 20-minute update every month, but I tried to condense it. But thank you for your comments.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a T-shirt with the trustees' pictures on it? A lot of proceeds from that. All right. Thank you. That concludes our board reports, and we'll move into committee reports. The first committee report is on collegial steering. Collegial steering includes the president and vice president of the Faculty Association, the chair and vice chair of Educational Affairs Committee. Trustee Snyder is vice chair, myself as chair, and then Dr. Bound and members of his cabinet. I think Dr. McLeod and Dr. Weber were there at the last meeting. We've been working our way through a series of, big, hairy, audacious goals, and then some other smaller ones that maybe we can do locally. At this meeting, we were able to talk about the college academy concept from Dr. McLeod. We talked about some post-COVID strategic planning, and we talked about some of the cost pressures driving the cost of higher education today. But I thought I might just read through the list of all the topics we have on our list, which we're going to get through someday. Creating institutional cultures of academic honesty, creating institutional cultures of diversity, expanding opportunities for interdisciplinary learning and general education, developing a comprehensive remote learning strategy, the early college academy I mentioned, creating focus areas that could be marketed broadly, creating a new streamlined one-year degree program that teaches you everything that high school doesn't teach, including soft and life skills and partnership with industry for that, reimagining the college post-COVID, mentioned understanding cost pressures so that we can keep college affordable, creating and networking and communication with the community, on-campus and online exam proctoring, which has been an ongoing issue, establishment of a DEI office and embedding through departments and divisions, which is part of our presidential goals adopted by the board that we'll formally look at in a minute, curriculum and compensation challenges of cross-listing and team teaching, enhancing the ability to respond to student needs, looking at new partnerships internally between continuing ed and credit, figuring out ways to get K-12 kids on campus and the community broadly on campus, expanding and incentivizing the engagement of unusual voices, exploring joint activities for students, staff, cabinet, full-time and part-time faculty, and promotional activities, such as volunteering for Habitat for Humanity is a team-building thing. And then trying to incentivize student participation in some basic economics, money management, and practical life skills. So we've got a lot. We've got a lot to talk about. It's a great discussion. It's as I said before, it's not an implementation committee, but it hopefully will help brainstorm. And once we get the college councils together, we'll figure out how to expand that into those types of activities. So that was collegial steering for this month. Human Resources, Trustee Smith Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report that you will find in our packet from page 1 through 8 is the same report that was provided at the December board meeting. And so the HR committee did not meet this month, but we'll be meeting next on February 5th at 8 a.m. with our new HR director, vice president, Dr. Harden. So we look forward to that.
That was a secret surprise reveal later that Dr. Bound's going to do. No, that's fine.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I think there's already a website with that
I think
information.
there's a website out there
FYI.
too. All right. Thank you. Learning quality, Trustee Ingram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Learning Quality met on January the 4th at 8:30 a.m. We were a Zoom meeting. Among those present were trustees Jerry Cook, Nancy Ingram, and Angelina Lawson. The full report of the Learning Quality meeting can be found in the board packet on pages 9 through 30. And Mr. Chair, our first order of business was policy review, which reflects standard procedure and really to clean up some of the policies. We have 4 recommendations for the board this evening. The Learning Quality Committee has reviewed the recommended changes to the Student Organizations Policy 31801. The recommended changes designate the appeal process if a student organization is denied recognition. It is the recommendation of the Learning Quality Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modification to the Student Organizations Policy 31801 as shown subsequently in the board packet, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and second to adopt the amendments to Student Code of Conduct Policy 319.01, which is on pages 9 and 10 of your packet.
This is 318.
318.
31801, I'm sorry, on page 9 of your packet. Are there any questions?
I do have a question.
Okay, Trustee Smith-Everett.
Just wanted to ask, we've discussed it before, but how many clubs and organizations do we have that this applies to? In general, I mean, ballpark would be.
Dr. Weber, would you like to
I was
help us out with
hoping.
that?
Yeah, you're going to put me on the spot. I want to say it's still north of 70. We have quite a few. And then obviously named ones and active ones become quite different. And that just depends upon students, enrolled students' interest in that year and having an active sponsor.
And if I can just ask another follow-up with that, is this appeal process done? Is it used regularly? Is it something that does happen?
No, so actually this would be new, and so this allows for an appeal if a group or an individual were to request to be a club or an organization and were denied. This actually gives them a process for consideration of that denial.
Great, thank you.
I had a question, Dr. Weber, while you're there. Once you're registered, or is it perpetual? I don't know if there's something in the policies that talk about if you go away or if there's some other process for deregistering a student organization for activities or conduct.
You know, I don't want to speak inaccurately on what kind of purging process or exists for non-active clubs. I know there is one in place,
Okay.
but it's not fair for me to speak to that without better understanding.
It's not fair of me to ask you without asking you before the meeting, so I apologize for that. All right, Trustee Ingram?
Is that something that we can bring back to you? You need that information?
I will talk to Dr. Weber.
Okay,
Find
all
out.
right.
Okay, all those in favor of the modification to 318.01, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed, nay. I'm sorry, I didn't reflect for the secretary. That motion was made by Trustee Ingram, seconded by Trustee Snyder, and it passes 7-0. Trustee Ingram.
Okay, thank you. The Learning Quality Committee has reviewed the recommended changes to the Student Code of Conduct Policy 31901. The recommended changes update the definition of bullying to match the annual security report, clarify application of the student financial responsibility statement to all students who incur charges on their student accounts, add health to the previously existing safety section, and update references to comply with changes to Title IX policies. It is the recommendation of the Learning Quality Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modification to the Student Code of Conduct Policy 31901 as shown subsequently in the board packet, and I so move.
Second.
Moved by trustee Ingram and seconded by trustee Cook to accept the recommendations for the amendment to policy 319.01, which is found on pages 10 through 17 of the board packet. Questions or discussion?
Just a comment and a
Trustee
question.
Lawson?
Very proud of the changes to the anti-bullying policy. This should definitely provide the president, I think, with more grounds to enforce anti-bullying measures and not find himself limited by specific items, as bullying can take many forms. But I do have a question about the gambling. I know it references a Kansas state statute. That's number 11, gambling, on page 14. I see that this year there are different proposals that are starting to come forward that might drastically alter this state statute that allows more online gambling for sports betting and fantasy betting through the Kansas casinos. So I noticed that the first sentence is in any form of gambling. And so I'm assuming even if that changes, that's not going to change for us because we've kind of put an umbrella that it doesn't matter online betting or in person, it still applies.
As I understand it, you would not, any gambling, however defined, you could not be doing it on college-owned, operated, or college-utilized property.
That's
So you
correct.
you can do it any other time you want as a student, you just can't use college property or to do it, so.
That's it. Thank you.
All those in favor of the modifications to 319.01, please signify by saying yes, or aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0.
The Learning Quality Committee has reviewed the recommended changes to the Student Disciplinary Action Policy 31902. The recommended changes update the policy to comply with Title IX regulations released in 2020 and the corresponding changes made to JCCC's Title IX policies. It is the recommendation of the Learning Quality Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modification to the Student Disciplinary Action Policy 31902 as shown subsequently in the board packet, and I so move.
Second.
Moved by trustee Ingram, seconded by trustee Snyder to approve the modifications to 319.02 Student Disciplinary Action Policy on pages 18, 19, and 20 of the board packet. Questions or discussion? Trustee Smith Everett.
Just to clarify, it seems like the biggest revision here is that we now have a section where the deans can offer an interim penalty to students before more official action is being taken. Is that the correct read of that from the committee?
Yeah, if I may, there are a number of housekeeping items in there, but the one most material change there is the addition of additional sanctions in the policy, and that's actually required based on the new Title IX regulations that we list additional sanctions as part of our code of conduct. So it's something we've been doing for a while, but listing it is a compliance requirement for new Title IX regulations.
Thank you.
Dr. Weber, would you just state your title so we identify who you are for the public?
Sure. I am the Executive Vice President for Student Success and Engagement and College Strategy, and I'm also the Interim EVP for Finance and Administrative Services.
I didn't want to try to say it because I knew I would mess it up, but yeah, you're pretty.
That's okay, I messed it up too.
All right, all those in favor of the amendments to operate Student Disciplinary Action Operating Procedure 319.02, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That passes 7-0.
Okay, and as a fourth and final report, the Learning Quality Committee has reviewed the recommended changes to the Student Complaints Policy 31904. The recommended changes clean up the language used within the policy and update the references to other college policies. It is the recommendation of the Learning Quality Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modification to the Student Complaints Policy 31904 as shown subsequently in the board packet, and I so move.
Second.
Moved by trustee Ingram and seconded by trustee Cross to adopt the amendments to 319.04 Student Complaints Policy. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We then heard several presentations. Dr. Singh presented a renewal agreement with the North Kansas City School District. The MOU formalizes an alternative pathway utilizing articulated credit for students to learn automotive technical skills and receive credit toward an associate degree. Mitra Augustin presented a renewal agreement with several school districts. The MOU establishes an articulation partnership to create a systematic, seamless student transition process from secondary to post-secondary education that maximizes use of resources and minimizes duplication. All agreements are listed in the packet on pages 72 and 73. Aaron Prater, Chair of the Educational Affairs Committee, presented several curriculum modifications. Those modifications are subsequently in the consent agenda portion of the January 21 board packet on pages 66 through 68. The meeting was then adjourned at 9:30 a.m., and we will, the next Learning Quality Committee meeting will be held on February 2nd at 8:30 a.m. Before I wanted to ask if Dr. Cook had any additional comments that he would like to make as having been a part of the meeting, or Trustee Lawson.
I have none, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, trustee Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Policy revisions are part of what I call the plumbing of local government. They have to be done. Policies don't solve all our problems, but they give us a guideline to do it, and I appreciate how much staff work goes into trying to communicate and coordinate those and update those with changes in federal and state law. So I assume, Dr. Weber, that was probably your area, along with Kelsey Nazar in legal. Thank everybody that works on those. The next item then, we'll move to Management Committee. Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Management Committee met on January 6th. Trustees Laura Smith Everett and Paul Snyder were in attendance, along with a plethora of faculty, staff, and others. In your board packet, you have the information on pages 31 to 51. We have a number of recommendations to make. Again, the first three deal with policy modifications. And I would say again, and by the way, they're in your packet as a group, but we'll take them each in case you have questions about each of the modifications. But I really applaud our staff for dealing with these on a daily operational basis. And while policy approval, policy development, policy revisions are a major responsibility of the trustees, our staff really deals with that every day. And they're usually because, as you said, Trustee Chair, a federal change, a state law change, a local government change. In the case of our animal policy, which we'll get to thirdly, it really has to do also with changes or working in agreement with the Olathe City Council and their Animal Control, Overland Parks City Council, and the Disabilities with Americans Act. So it's really an opportunity for us to update our policies to be aligned, and all three of these that we have are modifications. The first one is the naming policy, which you can find on pages 32 to 33. The major changes cleans up the language, and it helps the board may change the name of a facility if the change is in the best interest of the college. So it is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modifications to the naming college facilities policy 217.05, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Lawson to adopt the changes to policy 217.05. Questions or comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries 7-0.
Second one is the modifications to records retention policy. That's found on pages 33 and 34 of your board packet. And again, modifications basically clean up language used within the policy and add business value to the list of considerations prior to purging. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modifications to records retention policy 219.00, and I'll make that motion.
Second?
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Smith Everett to adopt the changes to policy 219.00. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0.
The final policy modification has to do with animals on campus policy. As I indicated, federal, state, and local considerations, but also the impact with Americans with Disabilities Act as to the proper procedure for animals on campus. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve modification to the animals on campus policy 630.00, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Lawson to approve the changes to animal on campus policy 630.0. Questions or comments? Trustee Lawson?
Just a comment, again, another proud change of this. I think it reflects that people with disabilities may not always be able to act as the direct handler, but a service animal remains important to the success, so well done.
I just wondered if the ADA included ostriches now after the woman at the airport was
Does he have a service
claiming
ostrich?
that her ostrich was such an animal.
I not see. I'm not as well read as trustee Everett Smith. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to see ostriches
Okay.
helping students on campus. But
All those in favor of the changes to the animals on campus policy say aye.
Wait,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Oh. Trustees Cross?
I think it was a peacock.
Oh, I stand corrected. Thank you, trustee Cross.
And I've flown Southwest more than my wife cares to admit, and I've seen so many things as service animals, and I too am glad for the change, so thank you.
All right, I think we had a 7-0 vote. Is there anybody that intended to vote no on that? All right.
No.
Next recommendation has to do with banking services. That information is found on page 38. Rachel Lears, Vice President of Financial Services, reported at the May 2020 meeting, the Board of Trustees approved the establishment of contract for banking service with the bank. The term for the contract is July 1, 2020 through June 30, 21, and is renewable for 4 additional years. We then also, based on the officers of the Board of Trustees for 2021, which we just changed effective January, the following individuals will be listed as authorized signers on the college's accounts held at that bank. Mr. Greg Musil, Chairman of the Board, Mr. Lee Cross, Treasurer for the Board of Trustees, and Dr. Andrew W. Bound, President. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to designate the aforementioned individuals as authorized signers on the college's accounts, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Ingram to adopt the recommendation with respect to authorized signers on the college's accounts. Questions or comments? I will comment that in my years as chair, I've always been listed as a signer. In my 2 years as treasurer, I was listed as a signer. I don't think I've ever signed anything. So this is for protection of the college, but very rarely used. So if that helps anybody feel more comfortable with it,
That your name will be,
that my name's approved on there. All right, all those in favor of that policy or that recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries 7-0.
Next recommendation has to do with transfer of funds. This has become a regular vote by us. This comes from the Center of Sustainability that $3,000 from recycling proceeds be transferred to the JCC Foundation to be used for scholarships. This disbursement brings the total distributed to the Foundation for scholarships since 2012 to approximately $128,000. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees authorize the transfer of $3,000 from the Sustainability Initiatives Fund to the JCCC Foundation to be used for student scholarships, and I'll make that motion.
Second?
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Smith Everett to accept the recommendation to transfer $3,000 from the Sustainability Initiatives Fund to the Foundation for Student Scholarships. Any questions or comments?
I would just make a comment that, again, I really would like to compliment the whole sustainability team. I know Dr. Antell gets a lot of credit for his leadership, but there are so many students that get engaged with this process and committed to it along with faculty and staff. And so, as I indicated, and as your board packet indicates, $128,000 since 2012 is very commendable. So I want to thank them very much for that.
And I think the signage on campus is constantly reminding all of us not only to be sustainable, but the benefits of it, how much we've diverted from the landfill, et cetera, it's one of our signature programs. So
I agree. I wanted to just say, echo your comments, Trustee Cook, that I think we at JCCC have been real leaders in sustainability. I think with a new president who's made it very clear that climate change is the forefront of his priorities after we get over this whole pandemic we're in. I think people will be turning to places that are already doing sustainability and have figured it out. And I really look forward to JCCC being able to lead in that way. And I think the way we are able to, the way they continually, this is probably the third time I voted on this, and I've only been here 14 months of having, I guess it's a year, isn't it? It's a year. It's my anniversary. Nobody got me cake. But I appreciate how much they fully embody the commitment of sustainability all the way around.
thank you. All those in favor of the transfer, please say aye.
Aye. Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion carries 7-0.
Our final recommendation from the Management Committee comes to you on pages 41 and 42. We've had a lot of discussion about the science lab renovation. This is a piece of that. This is let me read the recommendation. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the proposal from McGowan Gordon for construction manager at risk services for the science lab renovations at an estimated fee of $1,684,746. You can refer to the 21-026 supplemental information, finalist project cost, which is subject to change based on the actual projected guaranteed maximum price, construction cost with the final agreement subject to approval by College Council. And I'll make that motion before I speak to it.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Lawson to approve the bid for the construction manager at risk services for our science lab renovations. Trustee Cook.
I draw your attention to page 41. You can see that all the bidders that were presented there, and the justification of this bid was a thorough evaluation process was conducted by the team on each of these areas, and there's also explanation of their recommendation for McGowan Gordon to be the construction risk manager is given.
And I would note that $1,684,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but this is a project for all of our science labs estimated to be a total project of $22,500,000, which we've all committed to get going on. So this is a part of what we'll have to do to get those science labs up to standard. So, other questions or comments?
If I may, Trustee Cook, it was shared at the meeting that one of the reasons we did not go with the lowest bidder on this is because this particular firm did have experience with science labs. And I spoke to, at the meeting, my husband led a multi-million-dollar lab renovation in Lenexa a few years ago, and one of the things they learned is that firms that specialize in the background, the plumbing, if you will, of laboratories that require special HVAC or special wiring is really critical to the success of the labs. And I think that was mentioned at the management meeting, that this particular firm was a firm they felt very confident with for those exact reasons. And so just echoing that support, even though it is not the lowest bidder in this case.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Smith Everett. That was a great point you made in the committee. And I think it just really, again, is an excellent example of why sometimes the lowest bid isn't the best bid in the interest of the organization. So thank you for that detail.
The other thing I would note is that the low bid was $68,000 less. So there wasn't a huge amount of difference on a $1.7 million project. But
So just for
thank you for
public-
bringing that up, because I remember hearing that too.
We have some additional items for information.
Yeah, we need to approve that first.
I'm sorry.
Did you have something, Dr. Bound, on
I was
that?
just say that, or 0.3%, so 0.3% of the total cost of the bid.
They said there'd be no math.
I was only told that, otherwise
All
yeah.
right. All in favor of accepting the bid, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries 7-0.
We have a few additional items. Ms. Susan Ryder, Director of Accounting Services and Grants, reported on the college's physical health using financial ratios based on audited financial statements through the most recent fiscal year, June 30, 2020. The report also outlined how JCCC is using its resources, areas of financial strength, potential areas of improvement, and how ratio analysis supports the college strategic plan. This also includes comparisons to our peer institutions. I believe that you all have access to that report as a part of the management documents. If you haven't seen this, I would really recommend that you check with Dr. Bound and Terry Schleich to get a copy of this. The financial analysis ratio, to me, is one of the most important things we can use as a tool when we discuss budget. We've had some very interesting discussions and differing opinions about what our ratios, what our reserves should be, what tuition should cost, what our mill levy is, and so on and so forth. And these ratios, there's 5 basic areas: primary reserve ratio, net operating revenue ratio, return to net assets ratio, a viability ratio, and then a composite financial indicator. And we benchmark against 19 colleges across the country. And we've been really serious about this since, I think, Dr. Bound, 2011. I think the current report, I have it in front of me, but I don't have that page. I think it goes back to 2011. So at least for a number of years, we've been using this analysis. And I really would encourage all of us to study those ratios, and it helps you prepare our discussion for budget. The good news to the community is that our college remains to be in very, very, very strong financial condition, at least compared to our peers, at a time when finances are really a challenge to many of our 1,200 community colleges in the country. So I really wanted to thank Susan Ryder for that report. And again, if you don't have that, if you don't have access to that through the management document, check with Dr. Bound or Terry Schleich and get a copy of that. Rachel Lears, Associate Vice President of Financial Services, gave an update on the budget timeline. She reported that the annual budget kickoff meeting will be held via Zoom on January 14th. I'm sorry, that the kickoff meeting was held on January 14th. I'm just reading my notes from the meeting. Forgot it's already the 21st. At this meeting, budget administrators received information on the guidelines approved by the board in December and details of the budget development process. Rachel Lears also provided a semi-annual report identifying reallocations within the management budget. We do that, as you recall, a couple times a year. These reallocations are transfers from one budget area to another budget area depending upon need, and these reallocations between budget categories are transfers within the adopted budget and really have no negative impact on the budget, just transfer from one fund to the other. And you have a list of all of those in your board packet, as well. Tom Hall, Associate Vice President, Campus Services and Facility Planning, provided the committee with an update on facilities project. And Dell Lovett, Interim CIO Director, Enterprise Application Support, provided a quarterly update on information technology. She reviewed the technology improvements that have been made using stimulus funds, and there was also a review of updates on technology and infrastructure. And I would defer to Trustee Snyder and/or Trustee Smith Everett.
You gave a very thorough report, no additions.
I would just like to echo the comments about the ratios. Again, it's my second presentation on that. I found it really interesting and informative. And at the meeting I requested, and I'd like to request it here, to move that presentation closer to our budget process so that it's more aligned when we're making decisions around our fiscal health and fiscal decisions such as tuition or the mill levy, because it just offers a very different slice of our fiscal health, I guess, for all intents and purposes.
And I think that is part of the budget retreat that we have is review, but that's a great point. It's always good to have up-to-date information, and thank you very much. That concludes our report. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 3.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cook. We'll move on to the treasurer's report. Trustee Cross.
Every time I think I'm ready, and I'm just not. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your patience. The treasurer's report can be found in your board packet. The board packet includes treasurer's report for the month ended November 30th, 2020. Some items of note include, at page 1 is the general post-secondary technical education fund summary. November was the 5th month of the college's 2021-22 fiscal year. It must be 2021, excuse me. In November, the college made principal and interest payments on the outstanding revenue bonds in the amount of $1,429,050. And the college's general fund unencumbered cash balance was $69.6 million as of November 30th, 2020. Expenditures in the primary operating funds are within the approved budgetary limits, and it is the recommendation of the college administration, Mr. Chair, that the Board of Trustees approve this treasurer's report for the month ended November 30th, 2020, subject to audit. And I so move.
Moved by Trustee Cross and seconded by Trustee Ingram to adopt the treasurer's report subject to audit. Questions or comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed, no. That motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Trustee Cross.
Mr. Chair.
President's report to the board.
All right.
Dr. Bound.
Well, officially, Happy New Year. We are, as several, including Dr. Leiker, have recognized, we are at the start of the spring 2021 semester. I always appreciate it when spring 2021 semester starts and it's, in the 40s and 50s and not in the zeros and 10s and teens. Anyways, at the beginning of my report, I'd first of all like to welcome and recognize Dr. Leslie Harden. She has joined us as our Vice President for Human Resources. As we've reported in previous meetings, we had an extensive search process, and at the end of the day, she rose to the top and had the unanimous support of those of us considering her for the position. She comes to us most recently from Tennessee Technological University, where she served as the Associate Vice President for Human Resources. One of the things that I know I and many appreciated and appreciate about her experience, not only does she have a strong HR background, but she's also had times where she's worked with enrollment services, with student affairs, and then also taught as an adjunct faculty member. And so to me, when you bring that breadth of experience plus a depth of experience in human resources, that allows us to have a really well-rounded professional leading the group. She most of her career in higher education has been in human resources, and most of her career in human resources has been in higher ed, having also served at Athens Technical College in Georgia. I have been impressed with her deep commitment and experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was also part of the draw to her as a candidate. And finally, I would say, and then I'll ask her if she wants to make some comments, she's coming home. And so a side benefit is coming home. But more than anything, she wanted the job and we wanted her, and that works out really well for all of us. So Dr. Leslie Harden, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, Dr. Bound. That was very humbling, I will say. It's only been 3 days, and so I've taken in a lot, but I've seen and heard our faculty, our staff, our students foremost, and they've done some amazing and innovative things. And so I'm really excited and just look forward to being a part of JCCC's future and making it a great place to work. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Harden, we're glad to have you with us. And she reminds me, now I've only been here a day, or I've only been here 3 days. We'll talk later. I'm not worried about that. So anyways, as we begin this semester, as you know, we started this semester last week from our faculty being fully back and staff back on board, starting right after the first of the year. But I want to say thank you to those of you that were able to join us for the all-staff meeting and for our colleagues, faculty and staff colleagues, to see your active support, not only in the boardroom, but on an ongoing basis, and to join us that morning, as I know many of you could. Thank you very much. So we begin the fall semester, the spring semester, looking a lot like the fall semester in that as we look overall, we're kind of in that rough 80-20, 80% some form of online, 20% face-to-face, with the switch of we're actually a bit more remote right now than we hope to be as the semester goes on, just as we did the opposite in the fall, where we were much more physically present in the early part of the semester so that our students could have the hands-on part of their instruction earlier in the semester. We're just going to push it back further into the semester. And again, this is where I will say to our faculty and to our academic leaders who may not be faculty, thank you for the work that is being done to ensure that our students have the best possible learning environment. Staff offices, particularly those offices that engage with students on a regular basis, we are all open. That doesn't mean we're all here. And so we've asked each of our teams to determine what level of staffing they need to have on campus to meet the demand on campus for those face-to-face interactions. And again, this is where I say to our staff, thank you. Now, I also have to say thank you in this to faculty, because we have faculty that aren't teaching faculty, aren't classroom faculty. And so to all of you, thank you for the work that you're doing. It was alluded to about CARES 2 federal funding to help us respond and provide the best possible environment for our students and our faculty and staff. CARES 2, as we're calling it, we anticipate receiving roughly $11.8 million in COVID support. The requirements in that are that you spend at least as much on students as you did in the original CARES funding, which is approximately $2.5 million. First and foremost, we need to make sure that we're providing the supports and resources that our students need in order to be successful, realizing that there are many challenges that our students face. Everything from not working as much or at all to childcare to computer technology and access. And so we are now beginning the process of determining just how would we distribute that over the next 12-month period. First and foremost, it's about caring for our students, but it's also about ensuring that we have the right resources that we need to do that and to also care for our faculty and staff and institutional needs. There is so much going on campus, and in this report, I want to just highlight some of the things that even with COVID and being much more remote, this college is meeting the needs of our community. And so I'm going to highlight a few areas. If we look at the arts and we look at the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art, we recently, I think last week, had 300 Shawnee Mission High School students virtually experience our permanent collection at the museum, and then also get a virtual tour of the FADS building, Fine Arts and Design building. we have the volunteer staff that are there continue to receive professional development, because we know there's going to be a day when we open. And so just the professional development that goes in understanding the breadth of questions that they'll get when they're leading tours and so forth. But really appreciate their ongoing professional development. In addition to that, when the day comes and we can't open the door to regular enjoyment of the museum, when that time comes, we will have an exhibition fully ready to go. It's not entirely there, it's just about there, but it's out of our permanent collection. So when we're open and ready to go, we'll be ready to serve the public. From a performing arts standpoint, we're constantly working in partnership with our video services team to record performances and make them available to the public. Certainly, there are concerts that we bring in that are now virtual concerts, and maybe if you were in person, you'd pay X number of dollars. Well, there's a fee to access this. Some of these recordings, and you pay a small fee. As opposed to a ticket price, you pay for access through the link. And so really excited to see that. New here very soon will be Eat, Drink, and Play, which is a virtual date night combining chamber music and a cooking demonstration. So we'll keep you informed of that. On the continuing ed side, just so you know, we talk about 80-20 on the credit side of our delivery. We're roughly 70-30 online to face-to-face in the continuing ed side of our world. They've been able to take advantage of the CARES funding from a workforce development standpoint, and we have about 280 some students currently enrolled in various continuing ed courses. SBDC continues to provide their services remotely, and later this spring we'll be holding a digital marketing conference for small businesses, I believe in May. Our adult ed and GED courses are predominantly online, although the GED courses have a blend of some face-to-face and some online in trying to meet the needs there, and the ESL courses are predominantly online. The sort of testing that we do in the Rainier Testing Center are more often the high-stakes testing that lead to industry certifications and so forth. And they're testing 65 to 70 people per week that are receiving then, assuming they pass, some industry-recognized credentials, which are absolutely fantastic. I believe core to the mission that we that we serve in our community. Summer, as we think about summer and fall, summer will start to look, again, we're going to start to anticipate what does that step back into a more physically present environment look like. Summer, by its very nature, is usually much more remote with online, and it will look much more like that, we believe, for this coming summer. In addition, fall, again, this is now really the crystal ball. What does fall look like? But you have to start planning when you have to start planning now. And again, this is in combination with our academic teams across the college. But looking at how can we step back into a more physically present college experience in the fall, particularly looking at gateway courses, Composition 1, college algebra, some of the other first-year survey courses. Can we move those to more face-to-face? Again, it doesn't mean all face-to-face, but can we do that? And can we do it in a way that keeps in mind as we anticipate what the protocols will need to be at that time for providing that safest possible learning environment. So, do we know exactly what fall is going to look like? No, we don't know exactly what fall is going to look like. Are we planning for how would it look if we were to be more physically present? That's the direction that we're working in, but we're having to balance that with just how do you do that, and how do you do that in a way that's safe? And also build in from a scheduling standpoint. The reason we were 80-20 is it also allowed us to be either less physically present or more physically present. As we step closer to maybe just a lower percentage of online courses. We're just going to have to think that through very, very carefully, and we're trusting in our teams to do that. So anyways, as we think about a safe environment for our students, that's what we're working through. All right, now let's get to a couple of the numbers. Enrollment for spring. Enrollment is down 10% in head count and about 9% in credit hours. If we look at peer institutions around the state and around the nation, we're seeing a lot of 14, 15, 16% down. I think I've seen one outlier in California, but most are experiencing a decline. Remember that in the fall semester, we were down 8% at the end of the semester. Where are we most significantly impacted from an enrollment standpoint? Candidly, they're in our developmental ed courses, math, English, and reading courses. Depending on which subject area, they're down anywhere from 35 to 40% decline in enrollment. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're in an online environment and the high touch, high support needs that you feel as a student in a developmental remedial course. In addition, male students are down about 15%. And so those are kind of a couple of the outliers. One significant, one also notable, but certainly not 35-40%. So as we move into the strategic planning process, continue to move through it, as was shared in the all-staff meeting, we've prepared a draft mission, vision, and value statements. We've asked for your feedback as well as for others, faculty and staff across our college. We had about 360 or so initial survey responses when we first looked at mission, vision, values, give us the feedback on what currently exists. We are in the process between now and the 28th of January receiving additional feedback on the drafts that have been created. And we're already at, with a week to go in that feedback, about that same number, 350, 360 responses. When you look at total strategic planning involvement, start looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats work that's going on, in the latter part of when we were here in December and in the month of January. We've had, again, and there's duplicated count in this, but if you look at all total, we're pushing 1,000 people have been involved in one way or another. Now that means if I participated in 3 different opportunities, I'd be counted in there 3 times. So we want to be a little bit careful with that. We will be emailing you early next week with an opportunity to participate in a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We're going to send it out to you in email survey form and let you respond back to that. We have a little bit of a sensitivity, and so you can push back on me and say, no, I'd much rather do this in person, but sensitive to the time that we've been consuming of your lives in between the retreats over the last several months. So we're trying to be sensitive, but also want you to have opportunities to influence that. We will be coming back to you. The plan will be asking for full adoption in June, but we'll be sharing the plan along the way and asking for feedback and asking for not formal adoption, but just are we headed in the right direction as we continue to move our way through the plan. From a budget standpoint, you heard from Dick Carter, the 2% down, 2% cut being proposed by the governor, and the 16.8 in the Excel CTE. Do we want a 2% cut? No. Can we handle a 2% cut? Yes. The 16.8% cut is a much bigger deal, and we're working very closely with KACCT to really advocate for making us whole from a Excel and CTE perspective. Finally, I want to again say thank you, as Trustee Snyder did, to our foundation team for the exceptional work that they've done in this past year, and particularly the $1 million plus efforts in Some Enchanted Opportunity. And I just I wouldn't have imagined in these day and age that we would double the goal. And so, job well done. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bound. My first comment would be, I know one of your goals was that every person employed on this campus, faculty, staff, administration, participate in the strategic planning process in some way. So
50%.
50%,
Yeah.
not everybody?
I'd love everybody to.
Yeah.
I would love everybody to.
I don't think my call probably does any good, but I would call on members of the campus community to participate in the email surveys when you get them. They're fast, they're relatively easy, but they're important. And 350 is good, but we have 2,000 plus employees on campus, all of whom can contribute to our strategic planning process. And so I hope we'll get better at that. And if you're out there and you've done it, mention to one of your peers to do it so that we get more feedback rather than less. Other questions or comments? Trustee Snyder.
Can you have Rachel or someone send us the dollar amounts associated with the 2% reduction and the 16% reduction?
Yep.
And then with regard to the challenges with some of the enrollment, particularly those in the math and you know, I think the point is that students that need a little more hands-on attention aren't enrolling. Do we have any strategies to overcome that? Do we have ways to offer some additional in-person? And if so, do we have instructors willing to do that or spaces to do that?
And so this is where I might draw on Dr. McLeod.
At this
And is
point,
it too late
we
for this semester to
create
do
bullet
anything?
points, so that we can look at how we approach student demand. Whenever we see courses fill up, we start to look at what modality that is, if we have appropriate faculty in the wings to create new sections. So it's always a bit of a moving target as we work our way through, but we always adjust on the fly up until we run out of faculty members available, or we have maxed out everybody's availability with that, or maxed out the modality that we have, and which pre-COVID was a physical space issue. Now it really is whether we have folks with enough bandwidth to carry both their online and live loads. But we do make those changes as we go, and we're always constantly adjusting to make sure that we meet need.
Mickey, though, if we could think, though, and Dr. Weber as well, the strategies that we're using to attract students, especially in these challenging times, the blend of our ability to do more of the remedial work in a face-to-face environment, thoughts about that?
Yeah, when we look at the face-to-face environment for both remedial work as well as gateway coursework, we look at student success rates and the ability for us to provide that personal touch and one-on-one work that oftentimes students who need remedial type work have. We have availed ourselves of having a broad array of those types of courses in a live format even throughout the pandemic. That has always been the case and has been carried by our faculty because of the fact that we recognize that students who have remedial needs often also have a much more difficult time functioning in an online environment, which requires a great deal more self-driven, self-efficacy, and ability to understand what's happening both from textbook as well as interpretation of assignments and all of those sorts of things. And we find that students in an online environment, while being more self-driven, tend to be a little bit less vocal about posing their questions at the front end of a course. And, as we all know, who've had an opportunity for a college education, once you get behind in a course, it sometimes can snowball on you and be much, much more difficult to keep up. And so we've always, throughout the entire pandemic, availed the campus of having developmental courses in a face-to-face environment. That has always been part of our ultimate goal.
Trustee Cook?
Yeah, Dr. McLeod, thank you. Let my ignorance show a little bit. My assumption is that most of that remedial work would take place in our fabulous new resource center. Is that correct?
The classes take place in normal classes, but we do actually utilize the resource centers for those students to get extra assistance. We have had tutoring, both live and online, available throughout the pandemic, and we do avail some of our students. We've had a scholarship that we've offered over the last 2 years through the work of Dr. Valerie Mann over in academic support. We put funds together so that students could take co-requisite courses in reading, mathematics, and English who need that remedial work so that they can get extra hands-on time individually with a tutor. And we've offered 1 credit hour courses which our branch has then paid for through a scholarship we created so that students who had financial hardship but did need that extra help could avail themselves of those extra co-requisite opportunities to work with a tutor more one-on-one in a structured time environment, while also having the ability to come through and pick up free tutoring whenever other points in their schedule allowed.
So do we have a need for more tutors?
We always have a need for more tutors, quite frankly. We were looking at hiring 2 psychology tutors today because of the fact that as we work through the number of students who need that help, we have both folks who are professional tutors as well as peer tutors that we hire from the student population. So we are always hiring tutors. We're always moving people through our HR system, and we have some permanent postings for tutors that stay up pretty much year-round unless we take them down to tweak needs because we need a specific tutor for a specific kind of course.
Well, I really appreciate your comment about peer tutors, and now I'm getting out of my trustee role into an administrative role, and you need to slap me upside the head. But with the CARES money that we have and the challenge we have to spend as much on students in CARES 2 as we did in CARES 1, I really appreciate your efforts to involve peers for 2 reasons. For they can make some money and at the same time help students who are in need of remedial courses. So thank you, and I'll be quiet.
Trustee Lawson.
Just some comments. I really appreciate, Mr. Chairman Musil, your call for members of the college to really participate, because I know you guys have a lot of opinions, and I am not necessarily seeing them as much as I would like to in these surveys. And I think I'm a data person, so these surveys weigh a lot for me, and I think so I appreciate you just making that call, and I affirm that. And then I'm very much in the same vein as Trustee Snyder, just really wanting to understand the dollar amount of the 2% of the state reduction and the 16% impact of CTE, but then also what is the plan for enrollment. So I know typically our enrollment soars when the economy is bad, so that's not happening now. So I know this is the virus economy that's so different. And I know property assessments are predicted to, 6% increase again. So as there just seems to be a lot of factors to figure out where does the dust settle and how can we plan accordingly. So, it's my job is just to ask, what's the plan? And you've got the heavy burden to really execute the plan. So I appreciate that, Trustee Snyder, but I'm in the same vein.
Yeah. Thank you. Trustee Smith Everett.
Our discussion led me to a lingering question that I'd just like to ask clarification about. So with the 34% decline in enrollment in developmental ed, are there opportunities right now with the courses we are offering to have in-person developmental ed students enroll?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What I got from Dr. McLeod is we've made those available, and I don't know how much we've promoted them or whatever, so that students know
They can come.
I can come. And I'm sure, I mean, I think we've talked about it enough that Dr. Bound and Dr. Weber and Dr. McLeod know that we'd love to find a way to get that 35% down to 20% so that our enrollment is up and those students don't lose a year because of being concerned about COVID and only being online. So thank you, Dr. Bound, for that report. That moves us into new business. New business tonight, the first item of new business is action on our committee restructure, which was foreshadowed tonight by Dr. Liker's report. I tried to put the thoughts down on paper that we had. The board held 2 all-day retreats, one on November 21st, one on January 9th. The retreats were facilitated by Dr. Mary Spilda, President Emeritus of Lane Community College, and Mr. Ken Burke, a former community college trustee. Mary lives in Oregon and participated virtually, and Ken took on the burden of traveling to Overland Park for both of the retreats. And one topic in each retreat was the current committee structure utilized by the board. We have 4 standing committees: management, learning quality, human resources, and audit. Each has a specific jurisdiction set forth in our board policy 111.03, and each committee has at least 2 trustees as members. And our facilitators identified early on that our committee structure is unique to Johns County Community College. It's very traditional. It's been that way since I've been on the board for 11 years, but not necessarily in a good way. Their concern was generally focused on the amount of operational agenda items, and that by focusing on operational items, the board was missing opportunities to do more of a policy and a strategy review for matters facing the college. And another concern was that trustees not on the specific committee may be less informed and engaged on specific committee topics. So after talking about this in both retreats, we reached a consensus to try a suggestion made by the facilitators. Consider holding a single committee of the whole meeting approximately 2 weeks before the board's regular meeting, and the agendas will be screened to promote discussion of policy and strategic matters and to minimize getting in the weeds of college operations. Moving to this, I think we recognize would be a significant change in the longstanding committee structures, but all of us agreed that we would consider a pilot program through the committee of the whole alternative for 12 months and then evaluate its effectiveness. To do so will require the suspension of some existing policies and a planning process, and I've discussed this with Dr. Bound since the retreat. And at this point, we'll ultimately ask for a motion directing staff to prepare and bring back for action at our February meeting a plan for implementing a pilot committee of the whole project program. And I think it's important for us to commit individually and collectively to the new format, and we can start that by approving a motion tonight. So I'd ask for a motion to direct Dr. Bound and staff to bring back a plan that we could actually adopt in February.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Snyder and seconded by Trustee Lawson. Any comments or questions? I think those watching, and Dr. Liker, you brought it up there, we don't know exactly how this is going to work, and we won't know just because we adopt a plan and process in February, but if there are issues or items that any trustee has or a faculty member or staff member, please present those to Dr. Bound so we can incorporate those into the plan for next month. So, Trustee Ingram.
Right. Whether for it or against it, we've talked about doing this for 12 months. So we will come back in February of next year to assess how this has worked.
Correct.
And we do have an election coming up. Have we factored in that there will be possible changes of folks that we would, how will that work? What will that?
We have not specifically discussed that. My thought would be if there are new trustees next January, they will go through the committee of the whole in January. I suspect it will be a lot easier for new trustees to make a move to this than Us dinosaurs? You're not a dinosaur. trustee.
And that's fine. That was my only
Right.
question.
It's a good point, and it's the process of any change that doesn't take place in the first year after an election, I suppose. So we'll see how it happens.
Is it possible that we also commit ourselves to taking a look at it in 6 months, just to have another conversation and just see how we do
Dr.
it?
Brown?
If I mean, that was in our original proposal, our original discussion was,
I'm sorry.
let's do no, it's fair, because we talked tonight about a 12-month evaluation. My recommendation would be that we look at it in 6 months, kind of a process evaluation, and then take a look at it again next February, and make some determination of, do we stop, start, continue? What do we do?
Well, and I want to set it up for success.
Yeah.
Do not get me wrong. But I just think it's, once you factor in, we've had a year where we didn't have an election, and that's kind of nice because we're all kind of in the flow, and that changes things, so.
So why don't we put on the September Committee of the Whole agenda a review of the Committee of the Whole? Would that-
Someone else may have an opinion about it. I'm not.
We did talk about a 6-month review. I think,
Perhaps
Mr. Street.
Dr. Brown can just put that in his plan that we talk about next month, a review process.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else with a hand raised. All those in favor of the motion to create a 12-month pilot program, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion is adopted unanimously, 7-0.
Mr. Chair, is it the
Yes.
intent then that would begin in March? Is that what?
Correct.
That would be the plan.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing we didn't talk about at the retreats, but I think is, we're not doing anything with liaisons. So if you're liaison to Foundation or to KCCT or to JCERT, those will continue. It's just a committee structure that will change. Thank you. The next item on the agenda then is the priorities and goals for the president. At both of our retreats, we discussed in detail what some joint board and presidential goals for the coming year. Jason, do you have that coming up? We do have a short PowerPoint so that the public can review these as well. The 2 retreats were public meetings, noticed and advertised for Zoom participation, but because we're asking our president to focus on these goals as joint board and president goals, we wanted to present it tonight. I'm going to go through the 5 goals and then ask Dr. Bound for comment, and then see if there are comments from the board. The intention is to have a motion at the end that we adopt these, both to hold ourselves accountable and to hold Dr. Bound accountable. So our first goal is to establish a culture of holistic diversity, equity, and inclusion. Each of these goals has certain metrics that measurements. They have targets for the end of 2021 and targets through June 30th of 2022. I might mention these all mesh with our planned presidential evaluation so that when we get to June 30th of 2022, and Dr. Bound will have had a full 2 years, I guess, we will evaluate these ongoing, but once we get on a full schedule, annual schedule for him, that'll be part of it. The second goal is to increase equitable student success outcomes. We have metrics targets for that. The third goal is to increase mutually beneficial partnerships with high schools, employers, and community organizations. The fourth goal is to increase access, enrollment, in credit and continuing education programs. Some of this information we just talked about with our enrollment challenges. Priority goal 5 is to reimagine the future of JCCC, which is essentially completion of our strategic planning process, which will go through much of this calendar year. So those are the 5 goals that we discussed at length at both of the retreats. Dr. Bound, do you want to speak to any of those?
I guess what I would say is I just appreciate the work that we've done together in getting to this point and the clarity it gives me, and so therefore to the college community. I think for all of us in the room here and online, let me be clear, this does not replace the strategic plan that we are developing. This is a plan that allows us, as we're developing that strategic plan, to move forward. So as we talked about in retreat, it may be that when we get to fall, there are some tweaks that happen within the depth underneath this level of planning. And I do not see anything in this plan that would be contrary to anything we might develop as a strategic plan. And so, again, let me be clear. This is not meant to replace or supplant the strategic planning process that is ongoing as we speak. But this is intended to give me, and therefore us and the college, clarity in terms of where we expect to go over the next 18 months while we're also developing a plan.
Questions or comments, and then I'll ask for a motion. Trustee Smith Everett?
I wanted to just comment that we had spoken about this. It's come up a couple times this month about people in surveys saying that they wanted a direction. They sort of are waiting for someone to point, and say, this is what we're doing as a college. Here's where we're going. These are the things that are important, and a feeling of, getting on a bandwagon. And to me, this is you eloquently said it at the retreat, a stopgap, or it's sort of like a bridge to a strategic plan, which gives us, a way to make sure that we're clear right now where we're going, but then the opportunity to really grow and revise so that our strategic plan really meets our community's needs. But I feel like this is a direction which answers some of that feedback that was put in those surveys.
Thank you.
Other
I would disagree.
trustees?
That's a.
If not, I'd like a motion to formally adopt and approve the joint board president goals as presented.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Lawson, seconded by trustee Ingram to approve the 5 joint board president's goals. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Challenge thrust in your lap.
Challenge accepted.
Okay, good. I thought you might say that. There's no old business tonight that I'm aware of. We're now ready for the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a collection of items that have been reviewed by committee or are routine items recommended by the administration. They are considered generally in one motion. Any trustee has a right to pull any item off the consent agenda and have it discussed and debated and voted on separately. Otherwise, they would be voted on in one motion. Trustee Cross, did you have an item or two that you wanted to remove from the consent agenda?
Yeah, just as a matter of personal privilege, I'd like to pull an item off of separations and then an item off of employment regular. Unpaid extraordinary leave of absence.
Okay, so we will pull, I guess, I'm not sure exactly how to do this. B2 and B4 are all part of 1B of the section B. We will pull from the consent agenda item and consider separately item B2 separations and item B4 employment regular.
Yes, sir.
And
well, it's for Senator Baumgartner. I forget which number it is.
The unpaid extraordinary leave of absence?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's B6. Did you mean to pull B4 employment regular?
No, okay. I misspoke. I'm sorry.
All right. So we'll pull B2 and B6. Anybody else have anything they need to pull off the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Cook and seconded by trustee Smith Everett to adopt the consent agenda except for B2 and B6. Any discussion or comment? Not all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That motion carries. We'll now move to item B2, separations. Trustee Cross.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is with sadness that I wanted to recognize Helen Stoll's separation from the college as of March 17, 2021. She's been a friend and a committed civic activist. So I wanted to recognize her for her work at the college and truly comment that everyone mentioned here has had a vital part of the college community, so I don't mean to single out just the people I know, but also Senator Baumgardner has, although been someone I disagree with frequently, someone that I do talk to and appreciate her friendship, even if we don't always agree. And I think, I wanted to ask the unpaid extraordinary leave of absence, well, not embarrassing her. I was assuming, Mr. Chair and Mr. President, that was because of her service in the legislature. Is that correct?
Do you know, Dr. Brown?
I don't know the answer. I would assume that is the case, but
Dr.
Kelsey Lazar is looking on with a great deal of concern, and it's just a straightforward question. I assume that's the reason.
Molly Baumgardner is a state
I think
senator.
I might be able to help. But normally during the session and when she reported up to this branch before taking her place in communications, that was the case, that we provided her with a leave of absence to serve in the legislature each spring. So this looks to be similar to those in the past when she reported to the academic branch.
This is Chris Gray. Dr. McLeod's correct. It's due to her work in the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. And Mr. Chair, I mean, there's always several different reasons why I raise an issue, and the agenda I have usually is a mystery to everyone, including my wife, but mostly was to point out that we have a state senator on staff here, and though we do not always agree, I promise you, our conversations have been entertaining over the years, if anybody cared to listen to them. I do thank her for her service, and I thank the administration for aiding her service. So thank you.
Is there a motion to approve items B2 and B6 on the Human Resources agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Ingram moved and Trustee Cross seconded to approve items B2 and B6 in the Human Resources, regular Human Resources report for the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Yeah.
That motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda, I'm going to call on Trustee Lawson, who has asked for a moment to make an announcement before we move into our executive session. Trustee Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My fellow board members and public, over the last 3 years, I've had the honor to be part of many great moments here at the college. At our retreat, I was so grateful to hear the acknowledgement of my fellow board members for my work on DEI, which helped to upgrade our non-discrimination policy. I'm proud to have worked to promote lower property taxes, which of course I will continue to do as well. And I'm honored to have been part of the ACCT committee that helped to create a DEI policy handbook. I'm proud of the students who accompanied me to the JCC Foundation that some enchanted evening. We were able to talk to many businesses in our community, and of course, the work here at the college, renaming the new Midwest Trust Center. I've been honored to be welcomed into many homes of our faculty members to share a meal, to be their sounding board when they had thoughts. I'm grateful for the residents of Johnson County who would call to me to just see if I could ask their question or if I could provide them to access to our meetings. I worked hard to not refuse them, to ask the questions they provided me with no judgment when possible so they could hear a response. Last year before the presidential election, I was asked to consider a life change. With our country facing a pandemic, I embraced the idea of working a greater cause, but I remained committed, to helping our new president move forward. Shortly after the election, I informed Dr. Brown that I had agreed to accept this role, and in the light of transparency, I believed he should have known. And after the insurrection on January 6th, I felt more urgency and agreed to, immediately following the inauguration, work to heal our country. And yes, advance an agenda that moves our country forward. Oh, this mask is a little bit, sorry about that. Part of that commitment is one of diversity. It is the commitment to have more voices at the table who look like our communities, reflecting the diversity tapestry of our country. I realize that it is often more difficult for Black, Indigenous, and persons of color to run for office. The longer there is doubt about the opportunity, the more the opportunity is stripped away. So last week, I informed Chairman Musil that I will not be seeking re-election. I will be serving out my term. and look forward to advocating for the issues I care about. I have never been more excited about my opportunity ahead and the opportunities ahead of our country. I'm so grateful to so many who have been so fantastic and so supportive. Over these years, the new friendships, connections, and communities I was able to interact with and built a bedrock for me moving forward and helped provide me with a solid foundation for the future. For that, I thank everyone here.
Thank you, Trustee Lawson. Doesn't get you off the hook for the next year. Still work to do, but thank you. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, we have to finish our meeting tonight with an executive session, so it would be nice to finish it on that note with your gracious statement. We do need an executive session, and I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for consultation with legal counsel regarding contract negotiation, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. No action will take place during this session. The executive session will last for 45 minutes, beginning at 7:20 or 25. Anybody? We need a short break, but we better do 7:25 since Lee has to join by Zoom. So we'll start at 7:25, and we will end at 8:20. We'll reconvene in this room, in this public Zoom at 8:20, in the same location in the main meeting Zoom video conference for the final part of our meeting.
That's 55 minutes.
7:25.
8:10.
To 8:10. Told you there'd be no math. Speaking of developmental math issues, we would begin at 7:25 and end at 8:10, 45 minutes. I would like to invite Dr. Bound, Dr. McLeod, Dr. Weber, Dr. Harden, and Kelsey Nazar to this executive session. Is there such a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Snyder, seconded by Trustee Ingram. For those of you in the public, I think they will put up a slide that simply shows that we are in executive session. We will leave this room and move to the Lytle Conference Room to participate in a Zoom executive session where Trustee Cross can participate. We will return here, as I said, at 8:10. No action will be taken during the executive session. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion is carried. We'll see you in the Lytle Conference Room at 7:25, and Trustee Cross, you will join us through your Zoom link.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back. It is 8:11, I think. We were back in the room at 8:10 from the executive session. No action was taken. We're going to need a little extra time, so I'm going to ask for a motion to go back into executive session for the same purpose, consultation with legal counsel regarding contract negotiation, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. No action will be taken. This will last for 10 minutes. We'll go from 8:15 to 8:25. We'll reconvene in the main meeting Zoom video conference at 8:25. For the rest of the meeting, invite the same folks, Dr. Bound, Dr. McLeod, Dr. Weber, Dr. Harden, and Kelsey Nazar, to join this executive session. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Trustee Ingram moved.
Second.
Trustee Lawson seconded. We will reconvene at 8:25. Thank you. Welcome back for those of you who stayed with us through the second executive session. We've returned into the council chambers. No action was taken at the executive session. The only thing left on the agenda is a motion to adjourn. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Ingram and seconded by Trustee Smith Everett to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is carried. Thank you all. Long night.